The Winslow family built orphanages, but the children disappeared into darkness. Never should have opened that door. I felt it in my bones. A deep-seated chill that coursed through my veins. But curiosity can be a wicked thing. It gnaws away at reason, making you do things against your better judgment. I had stumbled upon the Winslow estate, a dilapidated mansion that once bustled with laughter if you believed the stories. Now, just whispers. Whispers full of dread. Every step I took on the creaking floorboards echoed in the absolute stillness. Shadows loomed, twisting in corners I couldn't quite glance at directly. The air hung heavy, cold, musty, and alive with the scent of decay. Something didn't want me here. I could almost hear it breathing. Or was that just my own heart pounding in my ears? These orphanages the Winslow family built were supposed to be havens. They promised hope, a warm blanket against the bitter world outside. But children had gone missing, vanished. They were there one moment and then nothing. Just silence, as if the walls swallowed them whole. You can try to ignore the tales you've heard, but the fear seeps in like smoke, twisting around your mind, suffocating you. I wandered through dusty hallways, clutching a flickering flashlight. Baby blue paint chipped away, revealing rough, gray undertones. I could almost hear echoes of laughter, innocent, sweet, but they felt grotesque in this context, like cruel irony against the dark backdrop. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from behind me, causing me to jump. The flashlight beam shook, and I cast frantic glances, trying to pinpoint the source of the noise. My instincts screamed at me to run, but I was paralyzed, frozen in a moment, heavy with fear. Then, a sound like a rattling chain slithered through the air. It grew louder and closer, wrapping around me like a noose. My eyes darted to a door at the end of the hall, slightly ajar. I hesitated, debating whether to call for help or flee. But the decision was taken for me when the door creaked open wider, revealing nothing but pitch black beyond. Why was I still standing there? Instinctually, I wanted to turn back, but my feet refused to budge, as if the ground beneath me had transformed into quicksand. The chaotic thoughts in my head screamed at me to leave. My pulse raced. I could taste the metallic tang of fear on my tongue. A dark figure shifted just beyond the threshold, and for a fleeting moment, I wondered if this was where the missing children had gone. Or worse, if that shadow was all that remained of them. And then everything went black. A sudden slam echoed through the hall, the resounding noise sending shivers down my spine. What had I done? Hey! Before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon, and while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The darkness enveloped me like a wet blanket, suffocating and oppressive. I stood in silence, every sound swallowed by that all-consuming blackness. Taking a deep breath, I instinctively reached for my flashlight, my sole companion in this dreadful abyss. When I clicked the switch, the beam sputtered before reluctantly banishing the shadows around me. But the light felt feeble, its glow unable to dispel the belly of fear that gripped my stomach. I was not alone. The shifting of air behind me was undeniable, a terrible presence hinting at its own insatiable hunger. Something ancient and feral prowled this forsaken place, possibly waiting for an intruder like me to stumble into its lair. I turned slowly, my heart hammering in my chest, and aimed the flashlight toward the door that had just slammed shut. There was no handle, no visible means of escape. It was just a blank surface, as if the door had never existed. And oh, I whispered, dread pooling in the pit of my stomach. I was truly trapped. Before I could wildly pound on the door, the faint sound of children giggling floated in the air around me, like a twisted lullaby from a distant memory. It beckoned me deeper into the darkness, though every instinct screamed to flee. My grip on the flashlight tightened as I stepped away from the door and toward a hallway branching off to my left, its walls lined with splintered frames, and what looked like photographs of smiling children. I hesitated, my conscience warring against my curiosity. But the giggles grew louder, overlapping into a cacophony that felt less joyous and more taunting, echoing my very soul's despair. I took a tentative step forward. The flashlight trembled in my hand as I directed the beam toward the first photograph. A girl with bright blue eyes, framed by dark curls, stared back at me, her smile unnatural, almost predatory. My breath caught in my throat. I moved to the next Picturia boy, his expression far too serious in contrast to the others, eerily hollowed and staring with a forlorn gaze that seemed to reach through the glass. Suddenly, the air around me turned icy, the temperature plummeting as if a storm had passed through unseen. My breath became visible, and panic unfurled in my chest. The shadows seemed to dance to life, swirling and coiling at the edges of my vision. I could hear their whispers, frantic, pleading. They were begging me for help, or perhaps warning me of a greater horror lurking and waiting. Then, with a finality that clawed at my sanity, every picture shuddered, and the eyes of those children followed moon-blinking and hungry. I stumbled back, heart racing, and then, just as my mind started to piece things together, the thick stench of rot filled the air, the unmistakable odor of decay erupting from deep within the walls. The walls shivered, a deep groan reverberating throughout the hall as if the very house were alive. The pictures began to break apart, frames splintering, glass scattering like thick raindrops around me. I turned to escape, but there was no avenue to run. A figure emerged from the shadows, those burning blue eyes, wide and wild, locked onto me. "Help us," it whispered, voice drawn like an ancient blade through my mind. "Help us find our way back before it's too late." Before I could interrogate the apparition further, the flashlight flickered violently and went out, plunging me into darkness. My heart raced as I stumbled back toward the door, fists pounding against the wood. Desperation fueled my strikes. I screamed, trying to drown out the cacophony of whispers growing richer, fuller, more demanding. But they weren't just children calling for help. They were vengeful spirits, ridden with torment and despair. I pressed my ear against the cold panel, stood frozen by the dread intertwining with sorrow, until a single low voice hissed, sending terror shooting through me. "The darkness feeds your next." The walls shook violently, as the floor thrummed beneath me like a beating heart. Then silencian unbearable, consuming silence. I closed my eyes, steeling myself against the panic that clawed at my throat. Just when I thought I might succumb to madness, the door jerked open, not with grace, but with raw force, leaving a void filled only with shadows so thick they felt tangible from that darkness. Something stepped forward, and in its wake, the air grew suffocatingly cold. I could hardly make out its silhouette, but I could see enough, a smattering of pale fingers stretching toward me, the faint outline of a face twisting in silent agony, that I had to get away. But behind me, the door slammed shut, and the whispers rose into a deafening wail. I was surrounded, and I was not alone. My heart was in my throat, and as the shadows surged to grasp me, I could only scream one name into the void. "Please, someone, help!" And then the world fell away. I plunged into the inky depths of the void, the echo of my own scream swallowed by an overwhelming silence that pressed in on all sides. I scrambled, fingers brushing against the floor that felt like a living thing, trembling beneath me as if it shared in my fear. Panic coursed through my veins like poison, an urgency driving me toward escape. I had no idea where I was going or what pursued me, only that I could not allow myself to be caught. The ground beneath me shifted, and suddenly, I found myself aware of a pull, a cold, insistent tug that beckoned me back toward the darkness. I wrestled against it, forcing my way forward, only to collide with something solid yet unseen. My palms pressed against a wall, and as if the house listened to my frantic whisperings of escape, the shadows thickened and began to coalesce into discernible forms. The faces of the children from the photographs emerged, twisted in sorrow and despair. Their once innocent features now replaced with frightful expressions, eyes glinting with a knowing malice. They hovered just out of reach, flickering in and out like a malfunctioning projection. "Help us!" they chanted, a chorus resonating from mouths that should have been silent. Their voices merged into a haunting melody that pierced like knives into my thoughts. "Why? What do you want from me?" I gasped, my voice cracking under the weight of the terror that suffocated me. "I'm not like you. I can't." The cacophony rose, drowning me in whispers of forgotten secrets and drowning sorrows. I turned to run, edge of the unseen beast I sensed behind me urging me to flee toward the only spot in the hall that was not covered in shadow, the faded light of a distant window where the moon hung, a lonely sentinel in an otherwise unforgiving night. As my feet propelled me forward, the whispers grew louder and closer. A wave of whispers crashed over me like a storm, ensnaring my thoughts with chilling stories of pain, anguish, and desperate pleas. Each story tugged at my heart, stripping me bare, revealing the scars that tied me to their fates. "Oh, you hear us?" One child's voice broke through the noise, crisp and clear. It belonged to the girl, the one with the bright blue eyes. Somehow, I could feel her gaze bore into my very soul, claiming me. "You must help us escape." Even as I resisted, desperately shaken by the intensity of their plight, I stumbled toward the fading remnants of the window, blood pounding in my ears. But shadows thrashed against the starlit pane with a vengeance. A swirling mass that taunted me with hands that reached out to pull me away from the light. "No!" I shrieked, flailing against the unseen pressure, feeling my body weaken as I neared the edge of those grasping fingers. Then, I faltered, pain tearing through my heart, spiraling into a darkness both familiar and alien. The girl cried out once more, her voice shrouded in anguish. "Your lives' thread is intertwined with ours, a binding that will not let you walk away. You have a choice to make." And in that moment, realization struck me like lightning. The stories, the horror woven into the very fabric of these walls was all echoing in my veins. I staggered back, feelings of empathy and dread entwined. The children were caught, suffering creatures who had faded into nothingness, and somehow I was destined to join them. "Please help us," they begged, a chorus of voices eager for release, each syllable sewing deeper threads of despair into my heart. In that moment, I understood the darkness was not just a curse. It was a parasite thriving on our fear and suffering, and I was being drawn into the fabric of its hungry embrace. With a final lunge, I broke through the chilling barrier of their grasp, bolting toward the window, the last flicker of light in a world so consumed by shadows. But as I reached for it, a scream piercing and raw cut through the air, seizing my heart. "Do not leave us. You will become one of us." The statement vibrated through my bones, paralyzing me for a heartbeat. In that moment of hesitation, the shadows lunged, grabbing at my ankles with cold, desperate fingers dragging me back, binding me to the depths of this forgotten horror. I took one last glance at the window, the moon casting a merciless gaze upon me. The children's pleas melded into a storm of horrific clarity as the darkness closed in, promising something unspeakable, and just before the shadows consumed me whole, I could feel the warmth of a two-cha soft hand that brushed against my cheek in assurance, or a curse, "Join us forever," and the world erupted into chaos, a swirling tempest threatening to tear me apart as I was torn between light and the endless longing of the abyss. The chaos swirled around me, a tempest made of voices and clawing shadows that sought to prise my very essence away. I felt a deep, gut-wrenching sensation in the pit of my stomach, the manifestation of every fear I had ever known pooling into a singularity of dread. Just when I thought I'd be pulled into the abyss, I felt a sudden shift, the storm quelled by an eerie silence that enveloped me like a heavy fog. I stood there, breathless, heart hammering in my chest, the faces of the children still flickering within the dark, their eyes wide and unblinking in unwavering reminder of the terror I had barely escaped. I backed away slowly from the lingering shadows, my body fueled by adrenaline and fear. The heat of their desperate energy scorched my skin, leaving an aching chill within. Experience had taught me to always fear the silence that follows a storm, and as I craned my neck around, expecting some semblance of a path, I realized with dawning horror that the hallway had shifted. Where once there had been a wooden door near the window leading me to freedom, now a solid wall stood in its place, rendered smooth and featureless as if to mock me. What felt like seconds stretched into an eternity as I began to understand that this house, this malevolent being that had claimed so many lives, had now woven itself into my fate. My only chance lay in the fading echoes of the children, voices that beckoned me from the shadows, urging me towards some unspeakable truth hidden within these walls. Find the heart of the darkness, they murmured, a singular entity woven from countless voices. It is the only way to save us. The pathway to darkness had blurred, but instinct drove me to a new potential exit at the end of the dimly lit hallway, where an archway stood, crumbling and draped in shadows as thick as fog in early winter. With each step, the air grew heavy, charged with unholy energy that clawed at my skin like icy fingers. I could feel the darkness lurking just out of sight, a sentient force waiting, watching, hungering. As I approached, the temperature noticeably dropped, the air heavy with a sense of foreboding. Inside the archway, a large room lay before me. The walls were lined with jagged, crumbling stone that pulsed with a half-life of their own, a ritualistic chamber draped in cobwebs, barren except for a blood-stained offering table at the center. My gut twisted as I stepped inside, the children's whispers crystallizing into agonizing clarity, revealing secrets too terrible to comprehend. The table beckoned me, coated in a chilling sheen that could only have come from despair and loss. Scattered around it were remnants of toys long forsaken. A worn teddy bear with a missing eye, a cracked porcelain doll, and faded books whose pages whispered stories of children whose laughter had turned to echoes in the twilight. I stepped closer, drawn toward a particular Itima child's diary, its cover stained and weather-beaten, yet somehow vibrant under the oppressive gloom. My heart raced as I pried it open, the yellowing pages stiff as if in protest. The ink was barely legible, scrawled with a scrappy hand that trembled with fear, detailing dreams of escape and cries for help. One entry caught my eye and gripped me with an icy lurch. The heart is beneath the floorboards. We cannot leave without it. He protects it. He won't let you find it. A primal instinct urged me to look beneath the table, and as I knelt with shaking hands, I pried loose one of the floorboards, my heart racing with anticipation and dread. The darkness roiled around me, the air thick with an acrid scent. As I dug deeper, scraping against splintered wood and damp earth. And then, there it was, a sudden surge of cold. I pulled out a small, intricately carved heart made of obsidian, its surface glistening under the wavering light. I could feel its pulse against my palm, an eerie rhythm that echoed beneath the static silence of the room. The whispers crescendoed into a wailing siren, echoing off the stone walls, growing increasingly frantic and desperate. Before I could grasp the gravity of my find, the temperature in the room dropped to a suffocating chill, and the shadows coalesced, swirling into a shape, a figure born from the very essence of darkness itself. It stepped forward with predatory grace, features obscured by a hooded cloak that swirled around it like wisps of smoke. Foolish child. It spoke, a voice like velvet darkness wrapping around my mind. You think you can free them? They belong to me now. The obsidian heart pulsed in my grip, illuminating the figure's face, and for a fleeting instant, a visage momentarily flickered into view, twisted, tortured, and grotesque, marked by countless souls trapped within its frame. My own terrified reflection stared back at me, the chill of my fate radiating through the room. Now, you will pay for your intrusion, it hissed, extending skeletal fingers toward me, the shadows stretching hungrily behind it as if they stretched out to claim me. Ready to envelop me in eternal darkness, I dropped the heart in horror as the entity lunged, primal fears clawing at me, and as I fumbled backward, I realized with dawning despair I had unleashed a force far greater than I could comprehend. With a heart-stopping cry, I turned to flee, shadows closing in like tendrils of smoke, and just as I broke free of the archway, a chilling voice resonated behind me, echoing with both malice and an unsettling longing. You cannot hide from your destiny. As I dashed down the hallway toward what I hoped was escape, I glanced back to see the room melting into darkness, the shadows forging a new exit, twisting, warping, until all I could see was the bright, pulsing edge of the abyss, consuming everything in its path. A scream erupted from my throat as I sprinted, the laughter of children melding into a haunting choir that reverberated with my every footfall, and just before the darkness swallowed me whole, I heard a final, chilling phrase that sent a jolt of terror through my soul. Soon, you will join us. The walls seemed to close in around me, the breath of the house a malevolent whisper that fluttered at the edges of my consciousness. urging me to surrender. I stumbled forward, my feet pounding against an unyielding floor that threatened to be swallowed by yawning shadows. With each desperate step, the echo of the children's laughter morphed into a sound far more sinister, an unreal scream reverberating through the corridors like a storm's thunderclap. I dared not look back, the decay of the air thick as molasses, choking me with a pungent mix of despair and dust that I knew I had to find an exit. I had to escape this nightmarish tableau of suffering and loss. But the anguished faces of those lost children clawed at the fringes of my mind, their pleas and whispers reverberating like a chorus of damned souls resigned to their fate. "They won't let you leave," they warned, their voices intersecting in a cacophony that stung at my sanity as I rounded a corner. I was met with an all-too-familiar sight, the grand staircase that spiraled upwards but had always felt like a descent into hell. Shadows danced beneath the banister, beckoning me to head upward. Yet my gut churned with the knowledge that whatever awaited me, there was no different from the horrors lurking below. Suppose I didn't choose? Suppose the house chose for me? The thought sent shivers down my spine. With a desperate breath, I began to ascend, each step creaking beneath my weight as if echoing the weight of regret. The walls seemed to lean in closer, the plaster curling at the edges like the fingers of a grasping hand. Then, just beyond the landing, came the stench of decay, thin and rancid, so overpowering it made my stomach lurch. I pushed through it. The stakes were too high to let repulsion stop me. I finally reached the top, but the hallway stretched before me, a twisted amalgam of doorways leading to the unexplored. In the dim light, I spotted a door at the end, slightly ajar, whispering my name with an enticing promise of refuge. As I moved closer, I heard the shuffling of feet within, small and hesitant, like those of a child. My heart quickened at the thought of liberation, but dread curdled within, warning me of the figures that danced in the shadows mixed with the sensation of being watched. I hesitated just outside the door, the remnants of childhood laughter mingling with the slamming of doors and emotional crescendos that promised madness. Summoning courage, I pushed the door wider, its rusty hinges creaking in protest. Inside lay what seemed like a nursery, toys scattered across the floor, teddy bears with button eyes watching me intently, and cribs lined against the walls, draped in shadows. Yet, there were no children playing, no laughter, only a suffocating silence that was worse than before. An ancient rocking chair swayed slowly, creaking softly, though no one occupied it. I felt a jolt of fury swelling within me. Was this some cruel trick of the house? There had to be a way to find the heart of this darkness deeper down, beneath all this horror. From behind an overturned toy chest, I glimpsed movement. I crouched instinctively, my instincts urging caution, and then I saw Ida, a small figure, dressed in tattered clothing, with a ghostly pallor that made it shimmer and distort like an apparition. Its wide eyes locked onto mine, reflecting a mix of fear and desperation, and it moved closer, drift Ida, a wisp of pale light barely contained. Imprisoned in the sorrowful essence of lost innocence. "Help us," it whispered, so softly that I almost imagined I heard it. "We can't escape, you must." Before I could respond, light flickered in the corner of my vision, drawing my gaze toward a mirror hanging crookedly on the wall. The reflection shimmered, warping as reality collided with something far darker. In the mirror's depths, I saw a glimmer of something, chains rattling and claws clenching, a trapped shadow writhing in pain. Suddenly, the child's visage morphed into something grotesque, deforming in an instant before my eyes. A mask of anguish twisted with malice. "Turn back," it shrieked, its voice filling the air with the tautness of impending rupture. "He's coming." Then, as if summoned by the child's cry, an oppressive darkness unfurled behind me, the air growing thick with malice as shadows slithered across the floor, sweeping toward me with an unnatural hunger. The figure in the mirror screamed, Ida, a pain-filled echo that felt familiar as I spun around, adrenaline surging. Another door slammed shut behind me, trapping me here as the shadows coalesced into a dreadful presence. The room itself seemed to tremble at the weight of its arrival. The heartbeat of the obsidian heart I had unearthed thudded in my grip, a tether to the very essence of this malevolence. The whispers of countless children cycled back into frenzy, a cacophony calling for release, for vengeance, for someone to finally stand against it. The oppressive weight of grief and despair suffocated me, and I clawed at my throat, desperate for breath, and just then, from somewhere deeper in the shadows, a familiar voice rose deep, gravelly, and filled with a disquieting familiarity. "You think you can play savior?" It taunted, mocking my attempts to escape the house's hold, and I stood paralyzed as the figure materialized from the dark, eyes glimmering like obsidian, both terrifyingly familiar and profoundly alien, its form twisting in and out of clarity, embodying every nightmare I had ever confronted. "Join them," it hissed, the air around me shuddering with sinister laughter, tightening like a noose around my throat. Just as darkness threatened to claim me entirely, I lunged forward, desperate to grasp the pulsating heart, my only connection to these children's souls. But before my fingertips touched the surface, darkness enveloped me. A crude hand grasping my wrist, pulling me back into the depths of despair. I felt the cold press of despair around my chest, choking me, and the last thing I heard before losing myself in that void was that child's voice. No longer pleading, "Now it's your turn to pay." The echoes of that final statement clung to me like a suffocating shroud as the shadows twisted tighter around my limbs. A chilling grip that felt more like a living entity than mere darkness. Panic turned to despair, and I grappled with the realization that I might never escape. My heart pounded in my ears, syncing with the grotesque rhythm of the entity's murmur, promising a torment more profound than I could imagine. Suddenly, there was a blinding flash of light, illuminating the room and sending the shadows writhing back momentarily like cockroaches caught in the open. I shielded my eyes, trying to focus, breath hitching as I tried to reorient myself. The nursery's once inviting atmosphere was marred beyond recognition. Now a theater of horrors staging my ruin. As the brightness subsided, I found myself staring into the mirror once more, its surface a swirling whirlpool of torment. The trapped shadow within reflected agony. A visage I no longer recognized, mouth open in silent scream. The child had vanished, yet left behind the remnants of its plea. "Help us!" The words, still echoing in my mind, sparked a flicker of defiance against the gripping dread. I took a step back, mentally reassessing my surroundings. The rocking chair swayed gently as if in distress, and the toys scattered on the floor began to shift. A tiny ballerina toy rotating in place, its arm careless, the tiny porcelain leg threatening to shatter against the wood. A palpable energy rippled around me as I pulled free from the shadow's grip, charging toward the door. I entered. Just as I reached for the knob, a series of low, guttural growls surged from behind, a warning that I was not alone. An oppressive weight pressed onto my shoulders, and I felt the pulsing heartbeat of the house resume, now with a rhythm that harmonized with the dark presence clawing at the threshold. I hesitated, glancing back. There was something waiting in the maw of the nursery, something that had watched and waited with a twisted patience. That a figure loomed just beyond the perimeter of the light, its features obscured, yet the air shimmered with malevolence, thickening like tar. The atmosphere crackled with anticipatory energy, and memories of laughter began to resonate from within the very walls themselves. Faint outlines of children whirled about, flitting between the debris as if performing a disjointed dance, smirking at their captor. "Come and play, stay with us forever." Their voices chimed, warped joy mingling seamlessly with their cries of anguish. I could feel their essence coiling around me, fingers grasping at my wrist, welcoming me to their eternal nightmare. "Enough!" I shouted, a sound that barely made it over the cacophony. I turned the knob, desperate to be free of their grasp, and flung the door open, plunging into the dim corridor. My heart raced, the instinct to flee burning hot in my chest. Down the corridor, the air shifted. I sprinted, footsteps echoing through the empty expanse until I reached another door, a heavy oak barrier embellished with intricate carvings of forest creatures and twisted, gnarled trees, the wood damp and cold beneath my palms. Just as I began to push it open, an unnatural wail erupted behind me, a sound of pure terror that sliced through the air. I glanced over my shoulder, and the shadow had reached out, tendrils reaching like grasping fingers across the ground, made almost solid by its intent. That in that moment of weakness, I felt a chill race down my spine as the air around me became thick and electric, a harbinger of something far worse. Steeling myself, I swung the door open and stumbled inside. The sight left me breathless. It was a dining room, ornate and elegantly furnished, yet warped beyond recognition. The table was set for a feast of grotesque proportions, brimming with what appeared to be decayed remnants, bones and belongings of the lost children serving as grotesque centerpiece. A grand chandelier overhead flickered with a ghostly light, illuminating a spectral figure standing by the far wall. That it was a woman, draped in a flowing white gown that whispered with each shift, her long tangled hair curled around her shoulders. Her eyes burned brightly, pools of hatred and sorrow seeming to combine into one. "You shouldn't have come here," she rasped. "Once you've entered Winslow's heart, it never lets you leave." Dread surged, my pulse racing as she lifted her arm and pointed a trembling finger toward me, her lips twisting into an unsettling smile. Before I could react, the floor beneath me roared, splintering and cracking, and the woman began to melt into shadows that swirled around my feet. "It craves you. It knows you," she shrieked, her voice distorted by the chaos swirling about me. Submerged in a terrifying maelstrom, I felt the ground fall away, dragging me with it. I grasped for anything to hold on to, desperately trying to pull myself back to sanity, back to reality, back from the spine-chilling horror. The darkness engulfed me, and as I tumbled into its abyss, the whispers of 1,000 lost souls swirled around me, their howls wrapped in seductive promises of understanding and fate. "Join us," beckoned a voice, unmistakably familiar, pulling me deeper into the void. "You'll never feel alone again." And just as I reached the brink of surrender, the world exploded in blinding light again, a roar that threatened to consume everything. My last thought spiraled into anxiety as the illusion of safety shattered within my mind. There, blinking in the brilliance, I saw a door at the other end of the room, labeled battered, but pleading for a choice as shadows flitted behind its jagged edges, urging me to step back into their depths. The fleeting moment of clarity was gone, leaving only lingering dread as the wails of the lost drowned out reason. With every ounce of will, I lunged for that door, a final desperate rejection of the chilling embrace that still clutched at my back. But as I reached for the handle, only one question echoed in my mind: what awaited me on the other side? The handle was cold beneath my fingers, sending ice through my veins as I wrestled with the uncertainty of what lay beyond. A part of me wrestled with the insatiable desire to escape, yet the urge to turn back and seek the women's promises of belonging and freedom clawed at my very core. I turned it slowly, a creak echoing through the suffocating air as the door swung open. What greeted me was a chaotic amalgamation of color and sound that twisted my perception. A carnival turned grotesque, illuminated by a backdrop of flickering lights. The pungent scent of popcorn and cotton candy mingled horrifyingly with something far more malignant. The sweetness masked the underlying stench of decay. It felt as if the horrid nursery had birthed this nightmarish spectacle, comprising shrieks of mirth twisted into cries of despair. As I stepped inside, the world around me warped, every joy stripped of its innocence. Laughter rang with malice, and when a group of phantom children began to materialize, their faces twisted into expressions of manic glee that did not match the sadness in their eyes, dread crept back into my heart. "Come play with us," they shrieked in harmony, their voices merging into a chilling symphony that curdled my blood. "Games forever. No one ever leaves. Stay with us." Not willing to succumb to their insistent wails, I pushed through the spectral crowd, the world blurring into a mess of haunting illusions. Faces swirled, morphing into my childhood friends long lost and forgotten, each of them reaching out, hands outstretched, but their eyes burned with darkness, desperation clinging to the edges of their laughter. "Help us," a voice cried out from the throng. I found myself scanning faces, desperately searching for the familiar features of my long-gone companions. Yet as I moved, I noticed the carnival became a dark reflection of itself. Grotesque masks grinning hungrily, their wearers lurking just out of my view. I dared not let myself dwell on the ones who watched from the shadows, their presence like a weight pressing down on my shoulders, evoking a fear that gnawed at my resolve. In the center of the madness sat a carousel, painted horses twisting and spinning in a mocked semblance of cheer. The bright colors faded into muted, grim tones under the scrutiny of the nightmare that enveloped me. A figure dressed in a tattered clown suit perched on one of the horses, its features ebbing and flowing, defining itself into something hideous, the smile stretching impossibly wide, the eyes never blinking welcome. It cackled, a sound that shattered whatever fortitude I was clinging to. "Let's play a game, shall we?" The ground shook, and the children leapt from their positions, the laughter turning into an unsettling chant. "Play, play, play." They circled me, their movements discordant, creating a barrier I could not break through. The harrowing figure on the carousel gyrated, beginning to rise from its perch, the mass of unsettling colors swirling, morphing into a shape that resembled something terrifying, a grotesque specter of joy. My heart raced, visions of the darkness trailing me resurfacing along with the clamoring voices of the lost. I stumbled backward, adrenaline coursing through my veins, urging me to flee. Yet even as I turned away, the carnival writhed, transforming into a labyrinth of mirrors that reflected not only my terror but also the dread lurking behind those deceptively smiling faces. I ran toward what I hoped was an exit. Yet as I did, every direction seemed to twist in on itself, leading me deeper into the tangled web of horror. The eye-piercing lights dimmed abruptly, plunging me into eerie half-light where the clowns seemed to grow fangs, their laughter intertwining with a mournful melody. Suddenly, I turned a corner to find myself confronting a vast mirror reflecting not just my reflection but a twisted reality where shadows danced, animated by a force unseen. My heart dropped. In the glass, I saw figures, children huddled together, their mouths silently screaming, their limbs entwined in chains of darkness, pulling them backward into the void that haunted my every move. "Oh," I gasped, straining against the invisible force as I backed away, hands slapping against the cool surface of the mirror. Then, a chilling voice, smooth and serpentine, slithered through the darkness. "If you want them, you must join us." That I barely had time to process those words before the surface of the mirror rippled violently, and tendrils of shadow reached through, grasping for me. Gripping my arms with unnatural strength, the shadows pulled me closer, sweet promises mingling with the cries of the damned as the line between reality and torment blurred dangerously, with desperation lending me strength. I executed a wild lurch to the side, evading their grasp, and dashed toward the now gaping portal from which I'd come. But the laughter shifted, and the countless voices drifted in, warping my perceptions, swirling chaos beckoning me closer to join their cursed revelry. "Join us," they called, the choir futilely echoing in my mind as I skidded toward the void, desperate to escape the malevolent pull and searing hatred burning behind me. I plunged forward, but a last-second glimpse at my pursuers froze my heart. The clown emerged fully from the eerie depths, the rippling grotesque visage forming a malicious smile. "You will stay forever among friends." As I hurled myself through the darkness of the portal, the last thing I heard was their unified laughter, a crescendo that swallowed all light and hope, echoing in my mind as I fell into an uncertain abyss. What awaited me on the other side? I thought, the question hanging like a shadow, a question that turned a voice to breathless whispers, all answers lost to a weight deep within despair. The air was thick when I tumbled through the portal, and I landed on a hard, unforgiving surface. The shock reverberated through my limbs, but fear clawed at my chest, demanding I rise again. I pushed myself off the ground, swirling through disorientation and distress. My surroundings had morphed completely. The carnival's grotesque delight was now replaced with an oppressive silence, tinged with an overwhelming sense of dread that made each breath feel like an intrusion. I was in a dimly lit corridor, lit by flickering overhead lights that hummed with an unsettling energy. The walls were painted a faded, sickly yellow, peeling at the edges, as if revealing the rot beneath. My heart raced as I gazed into the narrow hall, bordered by grim wooden doors, each one marked by sinister tales of abandonment. A faint scratching sound reverberated through the air, skittering down the corridor like a spider waiting for its meal. "Is anyone here?" My voice came out as a whisper, barely cutting through the eerie silence. I strained to listen, hoping for a response, but all that lingered was the deep-seated feeling of being watched. The scratching stopped abruptly, leaving an oppressive stillness that had me glancing back toward the portal. The vibrant chaos of my previous encounter felt like a lifetime away, replaced with an insistent claustrophobia. Tentatively, I edged toward the nearest door, the wood splintered as if clawed by desperate hands. I reached out, hesitating before gripping the cold handle. It was heavy in my palm, as though it bore the weight of the souls trapped behind that threshold. The candlelight beneath the door flickered eerily in the draught, urging me to step back, but curiosity drove me. With a swift turn, I swung it open. What lay inside was a room that felt caught between nightmare and memory. Walls adorned with faded drawing children's doodles of joy, scribbles of sunshine and laughter stood in stark contrast to the dampness that surrounded me. Yet the air was thick with the scent of iron and despair, redolent of something far more sinister than shadows on paper. At the center of the room, a dusty rocking horse stood lifeless, its paint chipped and form twisted, much like the memories of joy it once carried. But the strangest part lay before Ida Small, frayed doll with a missing eye, staring blankly at me, mouth stretched wide in a permanent scream. A shiver raced down my spine, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the lifeless toys surrounding me were the remnants of lost laughter. Suddenly, a rustle came from the shadows, shattering my momentary reverie. I whipped around, fear clawing at my mind, but saw nothing. Just shadows gathered in the corners, waiting with a patience only darkness could possess. I took a cautious step back, intending to retreat, when from the corner of my eye, I noticed an old, illuminated mirror atop a dusty dresser at the far end of the room. Compelled by some force I couldn't comprehend, I inched toward it, the scratching sound returning, louder now, resonating in my bones. As I approached, the mirror seemed to pulse with life, glowing warm despite the decay surrounding it. In its reflection, I barely recognized myself. My image flickered as if unsure it belonged there at all, the shadows looming behind me shifting with an urgency that made my skin creep. Then, from the depths of the mirror, a child's face appeared, eyes wide and pleading, mouth open in silent anguish. "Help us," the apparition mouthed, tears streaming down its cheeks. The moment felt like an eternity, time stretching as I reached out instinctively. But as my fingertips grazed the cold surface, the child's face twisted in anguish, transforming into another figure, one I recognized all too well. That it was one of my childhood friends, lost before my time, their features contorted in horror. "Get out of here!" they screamed soundlessly, their hands reaching out in desperation. The mirror began to crack, spreading like lightning through glass, the voices of tormented souls emerging in a cacophony that filled my head with dread. And then, just as quickly, the image vanished, leaving behind an empty reflection that seemed to pulse ominously, echoing the whispers that now surrounded me from every corner of the room. They were there, the children, their soft cries blending into a haunting lullaby. "Stay, play forever." Panic surged through me as a chilling realization sank in. The mirror was no ordinary glass. It beckoned for me, promised connection, and yet threatened to consume my very soul. I turned to flee, yet the shadows had extended their grip, creeping closer, dragging behind them the remnants of my childhood, the laughter now my own twisted torment. As I broke into a sprint, feeling the brush of unseen fingers on my back, a low rumble shook the very foundations of this oppressive space. The walls began to shift, and from them, whispered remnants emerged, a chorus of yearning faces, twisted with anguish and rage, their mouths opening in silent screams. They never escape, the shadows hissed, voices overlapping in a tortured symphony. "You are one of us now." I careered towards the door, throwing myself against it, but it refused to budge, becoming an immovable wall that mocked my frantic escape. Behind me, laughter rose, warping into a sinister chant. "Join us! Join us!" The very air around me thickened, and I sensed the moment before darkness enveloped my senses, the voices swelling into a terrifying crescendo that fused with my own heartbeat. Just before I succumbed, a sudden coupling of shrieks pierced through the cacophony, the unmistakable sound of a familiar scream, one I recognized all too well. The portal I had come from pulsed eagerly behind me as if inviting me back. But the shadows lunged, a million faces pulling me back toward their jagged embrace, the sound of desperate laughter echoing around me. For one last moment, I glimpsed the swirling mass of figures clawing at the glass, desperate and shattered, before the darkness consumed me entirely. I screamed, but no sound ripped from my throat, and just before the terror swallowed me, I saw their faces smiling back, sickly sweet and insatiably hungry, blending into the ever-deepening dark. They were waiting, and I was not alone anymore. The lights vanished, leaving nothing but the whispers of the damned, and the snickering echoes of broken toys waiting for the next child to join their eternal play. The disorienting pull of darkness receded momentarily, only to be replaced by an insistent pulse that reverberated around me. Disentangled from the grip of shadows, I found myself back in the corridor, the oppressive silence pressing against my skin like a vice. My heart hammered in my chest, a metronome of fear ticking steadily in the stillness. I blinked hard, the momentary flash of the mirror's terror hanging in my Minda kaleidoscope of faces, distorted by anguish and an unending, desperate hunger. Breathing heavily, I stumbled away from the door, recoiling from the murky dread that lingered like a tendril coiling around the room. Every second felt stretched, every flicker of the overhead lights igniting visions of the chamber I had left behind. I needed to escape, to find a way back to the portal and away from this nightmare. I turned to run down the corridor, but as I did, I became acutely aware of the walls closing in, narrowing, suffocating. The doors bordering the corridor stood like sentinels, imposing and silent, but now they gleamed with a strange allure, each one pulsing softly as if whispering my name. "Help us," the whispers turned insistent. A cacophony of scratched adolescent voices beckoning from behind the doors, their frequencies bending the air around me into a rancorous swirl of despair. I stopped at the next door, its wood carved deeply with what appeared to be the grip of tiny finger scratches so frantic they seemed burned into the material. The knob shivered under my touch, almost as if the door resided in a constant state of anxiety. Poised to release its contents against my better judgment, I opened it slowly. The hinges creaked with a pitiful groan, revealing a room steeped in shadow. Inside, it was eerily untouched, the air stale and heavy with the weight of mist breaths. A single rocking chair swung gently as though stirred by a lingering presence, its rhythm unsettling in the bitter quiet. A crumpled piece of paper lay on the floor. I bent to retrieve it, my heart racing. The message was scrawled in a child's handwriting, each letter jagged and erratic. "Don't let them take you." As I read, the air crackled with urgency. I felt it again, the sensation of being watched, of a presence lurking beyond perception, curling around the edges of the light. A shiver traveled up my spine, as I backed slowly away from the door, the scratching sounds rising to a furious crescendo. But I couldn't leave just yet. The sound being summoned seemed to resonate with something primal deep within. My eyes darted to the far wall where shapes began to form in the darkness, slithering between shadows. Spectral figures flickered in and out, their features indistinguishable yet achingly familiar, faces of children trapped in an endless vortex of despair. Fear twisted in my gut. I didn't know if they were lost souls reaching out for salvation or malevolent spirits hungry to drag me into their abyss. I took a deep breath and stepped back, heart thundering as I scrambled toward the door. Then came a blinding flash, and the walls of the corridor shook violently, sending tremors beneath my feet. I stumbled, a primal instinct gripping me as an unease charged the air. Shadows coalesced, forming one single figure, and suddenly I was face to face with a ghostly Childa girl, delicate and frail, with hollowed cheeks and eyes like voids. "Help us," she wailed, arms outstretched. "You can't leave. You'll never escape." Her voice pierced my skin, a needle shoved into the raw nerve of my consciousness, and for a fleeting heartbeat, I believed her. I turned and ran, desperate for the semblance of safety, sprinting past door after door, each one begging for my attention, their whispers mingling into a terrifying choir. The walls pulsed around me, the corridor bending and warping in response to the chaos unfolding just beyond my reach. Then the floor trembled more violently, and I stumbled forward, skidding past the remnants of fading wallpaper and streaks of what I realized were smeared handprints, bloodied hands pressed against the walls as if trying to claw their way out of this nightmare. Suddenly, I caught sight of the mirror again, peeking through the flickering chaos. It had shifted, now positioned at the end of the corridor, its surface reflecting not just the room but the walls lining it. Flickering like an old film, it displayed the memories of those that had come before my playful laughter twisting into despairing screams. And my heart raced as I understood the trap. The whispers grew louder, beckoning me toward the mirror's allure. As its glow shifted, enticingly warm and almost inviting, the child's face emerged within its depths. The same girl now pleading with me, tears streaming down her cheeks as a ravenous darkness consumed her behind the glass. And then, whether from my overactive imagination or something far worse, it struck me that the doors were closing, a finality wrapping its shadows around me like chains. I felt it tearing at my spirit, the remnants of what had once been my childhood brushed with the taint of dread. Panic clawed at my throat as I turned to sprint, but the corridor had shifted. The exit was blocked, an unseen force creating an impassable wall. "Join us. Forever," the voices shrieked, a last horrific invitation lacing the air as I turned back to the mirror, the girl's visage now morphing into something monstrous. Just as I felt the grip of unseen fingers clutching my shoulders, dragging me back toward the malevolence of the glass, I lunged forward to the mirror with a raw cry, and the surface rippled, rippling like the surface of a pond disturbed by a stone's throw. Just before the darkness fully consumed me, I saw the faces again, their cries of anguish rising to a horrifying crescendo. "You're one of us now." And then I felt nothing as the world evaporated into blackness, leaving behind only the echoes of their laughter, a morbid invitation still to join their eternal play. The darkness was alive, pulsing rhythmically around me, and I was submerged in its suffocating embrace. I thrashed against the void, but every effort only deepened my despair. I could hear their laughter, the lost children, calling to me, their joyous tones twisted and laced with anguish. "Join us, forever," they sang, their voices a siren's call, blending into a thrum that echoed through the shadows. The sensation of being watched returned, pressing heavier against my skin, constricting my heart. Just when I thought I'd slip into madness, the shadows receded, and I found myself standing hovering suspended in a grotesque tableau illuminated by flickering lights. Before me lay what appeared to be a grotesque carnival scene, every part of it off-kilter, painted with grotesque colors that had faded into a sickly pallor. The laughter of children echoed from every corner, yet there was sorrow woven into their warrants, a bittersweet symphony of joy intertwined with sorrow, and I understood I was in the heart of darkness, the very core of the nightmare that had ensnared the Winslow family and all those children who had vanished before me. I turned slowly, fear clawing at my throat, scanning the chaos. Clowns twisted in painful caricatures, their painted smiles grotesque against hollow eyes. Their sinister laughter wrung sorrow from the deepest parts of my soul as they beckoned me closer. "Come, join our game." The carnival calls sounded innocent but held a horrifying undertone, the promise of eternal entrapment. I desperately searched for an exit, a way out of this nightmare, but each turn dissolved into more madness, making escape feel like an illusion. I backed away slowly, heart hammering, when a tiny figure caught my eye, standing just out of reach, the girl with the bright blue eyes. "Help us," she cried, her voice almost lost in the cacophony around me. "You can set us free, but you have to remember." My chest tightened as I stared back at her pleading face, contorted with fear. "Remember what?" I shouted, the noise growing deafening. "What do I need to remember?" I grasped at the shadows, uncertain of my surroundings, but resolute in my mission to rescue them. "We're all bound here," she whispered, her words slicing through the chaos. "Bound by the heart." The darkness swelled, and visions flashed in my mind, images of children swirling in laughter, innocence lost to time. A sinister entity lurking behind the curtain of their joy. It was then that I felt a freezing sensation uncoiling in my gut, the realization dawning on me. The obsidian heart had connected me to this malevolence, just as it had bound those lost souls within its depths. The whispers rose to a fever pitch, and I could feel the tendrils of darkness reaching out, taunting me, venomously striking at my resolve. "Release it and you shall escape," they hissed, voices melding into one, echoing my very fears. "You want me to take it?" I yelled defiantly, stepping back as panic surged within me, swallowing the last shreds of courage I clung to. Then, the shadows coalesced around me, tightening ropes of despair binding my arms, rendering me immobile. The laughing faces danced before me, twisted in delight as they fed on my torment. The child's desperate visage shimmered through the chaos. "You have to take it back. It's not too late," she cried, reaching out with a trembling hand. Something deep within me flickered, an ember of resolve ignited by her plea. I knew I had the power to end this, to break the cycle of despair that had stretched beyond lifetimes, and in that moment, a sudden clarity enveloped me. The heart was a weapon, the very essence of the darkness that feasted on the lost, twisted, and the damned. I lunged for it, grasping the pulsating object, its warmth feeding the rage that surged through my veins. "Enough!" I screamed, the very floor shaking beneath me as the laughter shrieked in horror. I raised the heart over my head, feeling its pulse synchronize with the beat of my heart. "You will no longer feed on their souls." As I thrust it toward the swirling darkness, shadows erupted in. Screams, their joyful mirth turning to sullen cries of anguish, and just before the darkness swallowed the heart whole, engulfing me in a cataclysm of chaos, I heard a voice that wasn't lost among the throng. It was my own, echoing through the void, intertwined with the whispers of the shadows that in that moment, I realized the heart wasn't merely a vessel, it was a reflection of my own fears and regrets, the very essence of the pain I had shunned for too long. I felt it all, the weight of my past mistakes, the echoes of laughter lost, and the desperate cries of the children merged with my own. I became the bridge, the instant of pure revelation, and in that heartbeat, I understood. The true horror wasn't just in the darkness, it was within me, binding me to every lost soul that had passed through this realm. The Winslow estate was never a haunted house. It was a manifestation of the souls I had neglected to remember, the shadows reflecting pieces of myself I had been terrified to confront. The last glimmer of the obsidian heart flickered brightly, absorbing every haunting memory until a blinding flash consumed me, illuminating the darkest corners of my psyche. And when I shattered the heart, the darkness recoiled, a primal scream bursting forth as laughter transformed into echoes of bravery and love, a symphonic requiem of souls that had struggled to be remembered. But as the last vestiges of darkness dissipated into the light, a chilling realization surged. With victory came a cruel price. The laughter intermingled with a profound silence that sent shivers through my bones. Although I had freed them, the darkness lingered, an eternal entity, forever tied to me, a haunting promise lingering in the muted corners of my heart. And as I blinked away the light, I became acutely aware of my reflection once more, not in the mirror's depths, but in the very eyes of the children now free to roam. Their voices faint, yet undeniably present in the corners of my mind, whispered, "You have awakened us, but you, dear one, are forever bound." That final thought twisted in my gut, the certainty that the darkness had not been vanquished, merely released, awaiting its next feasting ground. Forever haunting, forever watching, and my name now carried within its whisper. Soon, you will all understand what it means to be part of the darkness.